Welcome to UFO to UAP, the evolution of the unexplained. I'm your host, Matt Tones. Thank you for joining. If you're not already a subscriber, please take a moment to subscribe and also leave a comment. I'm keen to hear from listeners in terms of what are some of the future topics we should cover, and give me feedback in terms of the format of these recordings. All right, let's get into today's episode titled How Governments Track UFOs, the Global Surveillance Network Watching UAPs. A radar operator sits inside a military command center, thousands of kilometers away. A satellite silently passes overhead. Below, naval vessels patrol strategic waterways. Fighter aircraft scan congested airspace. Intelligence agencies collect signals from around the globe. Every second, vast streams of data flow through one of the most sophisticated surveillance systems ever created. The modern world is watched. The skies are watched. The oceans are watched. The battlefields are watched. And yet, despite all this technology, despite billions of dollars invested in sensors, satellites, radar systems, intelligence networks, and military infrastructure, governments continue to report encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena. How is that possible? How can objects remain unidentified in an age where entire continents are monitored from space? How can military pilots encounter unknown objects when some of the most advanced surveillance systems in human history are actively scanning the skies? And perhaps most importantly, what exactly is the global surveillance network seeing? Today, we navigate the hidden architecture of modern observation. The satellites, the radar arrays, the intelligence partnerships, the military tracking systems, the classified sensor networks, and the growing realization that the world may be watching far more than people realize. This is not an episode about aliens. This is an episode about data. Because before anyone can determine what a UAP is, they first have to detect it. And detection has become one of the most important national security missions of the modern era. To understand the UAP debate today, we need to understand the surveillance revolution that transformed it. For most of human history, strange objects in the sky were reported through eyewitness testimony. A farmer saw something, a pilot reported something, a police officer described something unusual. But eyewitness accounts have limitations. People make mistakes, memory is imperfect, perspective can distort reality. For decades, this represented one of the biggest challenges facing UFO investigations. Reports existed, evidence often did not, and that changed during the Cold War. As tensions grew between the United States and the Soviet Union, governments began building systems designed to detect threats before they could strike. Radar networks expanded, early warning systems emerged, satellite programs accelerated. In time, military commands were created around one central objective: know what is happening before your adversary does. What began as missile defense would eventually evolve into something much larger, a global surveillance architecture capable of monitoring vast portions of the planet in real time. Many people imagine surveillance as a single system. In reality, it's a massive collection of interconnected technologies: radar, infrared sensors, electro-optical systems, signal intelligence, acoustic monitoring, space-based observation platforms, artificial intelligence, human intelligence networks. Each system provides part of the picture. Together, they create what military planners call a common operating picture, a continuously updated understanding of activity across air, land, sea, space, and increasingly cyberspace. One of the most important components of this architecture is NORAD. The North American Aerospace Defense Command was established during the Cold War to detect potential attacks against North America. Its mission was simple: watch the skies, every aircraft, every missile launch, every potential threat. Decades later, NORAD remains one of the most sophisticated aerospace monitoring organizations on Earth. If radar systems stretch across vast distances, its personnel monitor airspace 24 hours a day. Its mission continues to evolve as new technologies emerge. What is often overlooked is that systems designed to detect conventional threats occasionally detect anomalies, objects that do not immediately match known profiles, objects requiring further investigation, objects that become classified as unidentified. This does not mean extraterrestrial, it means unidentified, and that distinction matters. Throughout the history of UAP investigations, one of the biggest misconceptions has been the assumption that unidentified automatically means alien. Government investigators generally approach the issue differently. Their first question is much simpler. What are we looking at? Could it be a sensor error? Could it be atmospheric interference? Could it be a classified aircraft? Could it be foreign technology? Only after conventional explanations are exhausted does the mystery deepen. But before investigators can even ask those questions, something has to be detected. And modern surveillance systems are detecting more than ever before. One reason is a dramatic improvement in radar technology. Early radar systems could identify large objects. Modern radar systems can now identify remarkably small ones. They can distinguish between birds and aircraft. They can track multiple targets simultaneously. They can operate across enormous distances. They can generate detailed movement profiles. In military environments, radar has become extraordinarily sophisticated. The systems installed aboard modern warships, fighter aircraft, and ground installations represent generations of technological advancement. This matters because many famous UAP cases involve radar data. The 2004 Nimitz incident is one example. Military personnel reported unusual objects operating off the coast of California. Importantly, these reports were not based solely on visual observations. Multiple sensor systems detected unusual activity. Radar operators observed anomalous tracks. Pilots reported visual contact. Infrared systems captured imagery. The significance of the incident wasn't simply what witnesses claimed, it was that multiple independent systems appeared to observe the same event. And that represents a fundamental shift in the UFO conversation. For decades, the debate revolved around eyewitnesses. Today, the debate increasingly revolves around sensors, and the sensor revolution is only beginning. The modern surveillance network extends far beyond radar. Above our heads, orbiting hundreds, sometimes thousands of kilometers above Earth, are satellites capable of observing activity on a scale that would have seemed impossible just a few decades ago. When most people think of satellites, they imagine photographs, images of cities, weather systems, natural disasters. But military surveillance satellites are often designed for much more than photography. Some detect heat, some monitor radio signals, some identify missile launches. Others track objects moving across oceans, deserts, and remote regions where traditional radar coverage may be limited. One of the most important developments in this area has been infrared detection. Everything with heat emits energy. Aircraft emit heat. Missiles emit heat. Engines emit heat. Even objects moving through the atmosphere generate thermal signatures. Modern infrared sensors can detect these signatures from extraordinary distances. The United States operates space based systems designed to identify missile launches anywhere on Earth within seconds. Their primary purpose is strategic warning, but the technology demonstrates something important. Governments are no longer relying on a single sensor. They are observing the world through multiple layers of detection simultaneously. This concept is known as sensor fusion, and it may be one of the most important developments in the history of UAP investigations. Imagine a pilot reports an unusual object, radar detects something unusual, an infrared sensor records an anomaly. Satellite systems observe unusual movement in the same area. Individually, each piece of information might be inconclusive. Combined, they create a far stronger picture. Modern intelligence organizations increasingly depend on this approach, not because every single sensor is perfect, but because multiple independent systems can either reinforce or challenge each other's findings. This is one reason why military encounters such as the Nimitz incident continue to attract attention. They involve multiple sources of data, multiple observers, multiple technologies, and that makes them difficult to dismiss outright. Yet, even with sensor fusion, significant limitations remain. One of the biggest misconceptions surrounding modern surveillance is the belief that governments can see everything. They cannot. The reality is far more complicated. Radar coverage has gaps. Satellite coverage has limitations. Weather can affect observations. Terrain can interfere with detection. Objects operating at unusual altitudes may challenge existing systems. The world is heavily monitored. It is not perfectly monitored. This distinction helps explain why unidentified phenomena continue to exist despite extraordinary advances in surveillance technology. There is another factor that receives far less public attention: classification. Many surveillance systems operate at classification levels far beyond public visibility. The public rarely see raw military sensor data. Intelligence agencies rarely disclose operational capabilities. Governments often face a difficult balancing act. Reveal too much and adversaries learn valuable information. Reveal too little and public confidence suffers. The result is a persistent information gap. Investigators may possess data that cannot be publicly released. Citizens may be aware that something occurred but remain unable to evaluate the underlying evidence. This dynamic has shaped the modern UAP conversation. When military officials acknowledge unusual encounters, they often stop short of revealing exactly how the information was collected. Not because they necessarily know what the object was, but because explaining the detection process could reveal classified capabilities. This creates an unusual paradox. The better surveillance technology becomes, the harder it sometimes becomes to discuss it publicly. Because the sensors themselves become sensitive information, this issue became increasingly visible following the creation of organizations such as AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. AARO's mission extends beyond simply collecting reports. Its purpose is to integrate data across multiple domains: air, sea, and space, and increasingly transmedium phenomena that appear to move between environments. That mission reflects a growing realization inside government. The challenge is no longer a lack of information. The challenge is managing overwhelming amounts of information. Every day, modern surveillance systems generate staggering quantities of data: radar returns, infrared imagery, signal intelligence, satellite observations, flight records, electronic emissions, human reports. No team of analysts could manually review everything, which brings us to another revolution changing UAP investigations: artificial intelligence. For decades, intelligence analysis relied heavily on human interpretation. Today, machine learning systems increasingly assist with identifying patterns that would otherwise remain hidden. Artificial intelligence can process enormous data sets. It can flag anomalies, identify unusual movement patterns, correlate information across multiple sensor systems, and help analysts focus attention where it may be needed most. This does not mean AI is solving the UAP mystery, far from it. Artificial intelligence can identify anomalies. It cannot automatically explain them. An unusual object may still remain unidentified, but AI is dramatically improving the ability to detect events that previously might have gone unnoticed. In many ways, this represents a profound shift. For most of history, unidentified aerial phenomena were rare because few people were looking. Today, millions of sensors are looking. The question is no longer whether anomalies occur. The question is what those anomalies actually represent. And nowhere is that question more important than in the world's geopolitical hotspots, because some of the most significant UAP encounters are occurring in precisely the regions where military tensions are already highest: the South China Sea, the Arctic, the Middle East, the Pacific, areas where multiple nations operate advanced surveillance systems simultaneously, areas where the consequences of misidentification can be severe, and areas where governments are increasingly forced to confront a difficult reality. Not every object detected by modern surveillance systems can be immediately explained. The implications of that fact extend far beyond the UFO debate, because in a world defined by strategic competition, uncertainty itself can become a national security concern. One of the most fascinating aspects of the modern UAP discussion is that the world's surveillance networks were never designed to look for UFOs. They were designed to look for enemies: missiles, aircraft, submarines, spacecraft, drones, hostile military activity. The fact that these same systems occasionally detect unidentified objects is almost accidental, and that changes the way governments approach the subject. When a civilian sees something unusual in the sky, the question might be curiosity. When a military surveillance network detects something unusual, the question becomes threat assessment. Could this be foreign technology? Could this represent a security risk? Could this reveal a vulnerability in national defenses? These questions help explain why governments around the world have become increasingly interested in UAPs. The concern is not necessarily extraterrestrial life, the concern is uncertainty, because uncertainty creates risk. Imagine a radar operator detects an object moving in a manner that appears unusual. Perhaps it changes direction unexpectedly. Perhaps it appears briefly and then disappears. Perhaps multiple sensors detect it but cannot identify it. Military planners immediately face a problem. They cannot simply ignore it. If the object belongs to a rival nation, failing to investigate could have very serious consequences. If it represents an unknown technology, the implications could be even greater. This is why so many modern UAP investigations are framed around national security rather than extraterrestrial possibility. The question is not what people hope the object might be. The question is whether it represents something governments need to understand. Nowhere is this more evident than in regions experiencing heightened geopolitical tension. Let's consider the South China Sea, one of the most heavily monitored regions on Earth. Multiple nations operate advanced military assets throughout the area. Surveillance aircraft patrol overhead. Naval forces conduct exercises. Satellites observe continuously. Signals intelligence systems collect enormous amounts of information. If unusual aerial activity occurs in this environment, it immediately attracts attention, not because it is mysterious, but because it could indicate a strategic development. The same logic applies in the Arctic. As melting ice opens new shipping routes and strategic competition increases, governments are investing heavily in northern surveillance capabilities, radar installations, space based sensors, maritime monitoring systems, all designed to provide awareness across vast distances. Again, if something unusual appears within that environment, analysts are compelled to investigate, not because they believe it is alien, because they cannot afford to not know. The Middle East represents another example. Many of the cases appearing in recently released government files involve military personnel operating in regions where surveillance activity is intense. We're talking combat zones, strategic waterways, air corridors, areas already saturated with intelligence collection. When unexplained observations occur there, they become part of a larger intelligence picture, and that larger picture often remains classified. This brings us to one of the most misunderstood aspects of UAP detection. Many people assume governments possess definitive answers. The reality appears more complicated. In some cases, governments may possess additional data. In some cases, they may understand more than what has been publicly released. But there is little evidence suggesting that intelligence agencies possess complete understanding of every anomaly they encounter. In fact, many official reports suggest the opposite. The reoccurring theme is not certainty, it is limitation. Sensors have limits. Data has limits, analysis has limits, and sometimes, despite all available information, an event remains unresolved. This can be frustrating for the public. People often expect modern technology to provide immediate answers. Yet even the most advanced surveillance systems operate within constraints. A radar return may be incomplete. An infrared image may lack resolution. A visual observation may be brief. Weather conditions may interfere with collection. Classification may prevent broader scientific review. The result is a reality far messier than either skeptics or believers often imagine. The public debate frequently presents two extremes. One side argues that every unexplained object has a conventional explanation. The other argues that unexplained objects prove extraordinary conclusions. Government investigators generally occupy a different position. They acknowledge that some cases remain unresolved, and unresolved does not automatically mean extraordinary. It simply means unresolved. This distinction sits at the heart of the modern UAP debate, because as surveillance technology improves, governments are collecting far more information than ever before. Yet, certainty does not appear to be increasing at the same rate. In some ways, the opposite may be happening. More sensors create more detections. More detections create more anomalies. More anomalies require more investigation. And each investigation reveals new limitations. The surveillance revolution has not solved the mystery. that has exposed how difficult the mystery actually is. Perhaps the most important lesson emerging from modern UAP investigations is that detection and understanding are not the same thing. The world can observe more than ever before. That does not mean it fully understands what it observes. And this leads us to the central paradox of this entire episode. Humanity now possesses a surveillance architecture that previous generations could barely imagine. Thousands of satellites, global radar coverage, artificial intelligence, signals intelligence, infrared detection, multi-domain sensor fusion, as interconnected system capable of observing vast portions of the planet simultaneously. Yet despite all this technology, unidentified phenomena continue to appear within official reporting systems. Not because governments are blind, but because reality remains more complex than our systems and sensors. And perhaps that is the most important takeaway. The existence of surveillance networks does not eliminate mystery, it refines it. The world's governments are watching the skies more closely than at any point in human history. The question is no longer whether unusual objects are being detected. The question is why some of those objects remain unidentified despite the most sophisticated surveillance systems ever created. And that question may define the next chapter of the UAP story. As we've explored today, the modern UFO debate is no longer built solely on eyewitness testimony. It exists within a global network of radar systems, satellites, intelligence agencies, military commands, and advanced sensor technologies. The world is watching. The skies are being monitored. The data is growing, yet uncertainty remains. For some, that uncertainty points toward hidden technologies. For others, it reflects the limitations of even our most advanced systems. But regardless of where you stand, one reality is becoming increasingly clear. The age of isolated UFO reports is ending. The age of sensor-driven UAP investigation has arrived. Thank you for joining me for this episode of UFO to UAP, the evolution of the unexplained. If you enjoyed this investigation, please follow the show, leave a review, and share this episode with others interested in the UFO disclosure, military intelligence, surveillance technology, and ultimately the search for truth. Until next time, stay curious, keep questioning, and remember, the more closely we watch the skies, the more we discover how much of it remains unknown.